Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Relationships Rule. I have a question for you. What if the secret to growing your business had nothing to do with chasing people down and everything to do with what people say about you when you're not in the room? Well, today I'm sitting down with someone who is a return guest to the show, and I'm so glad to be reconnecting with him. Michael Roderick went from high school English teacher to Broadway producer in 2 years, not because he had connections, but because he understood something most people miss entirely. It's not about access, it's about interest. Michael is the founder of Small Pond Enterprises, a brand strategist, a connector of connectors, and the creator of a fascinating new framework called the Triple Threat. Borrowed, I think, straight from the theater world, that's changing how coaches, consultants, and experts think about their own thinking. We are also, when we dive into that, we're also going to talk about why, right now, in this noisy, uncertain, AI-driven world, the people who know how to have a real conversation and build a genuine relationship are the ones who win. Are the ones who win. Welcome back, Michael.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're very welcome. I'm excited too. Michael, you were on the show back in 2021. It was my episode 118, which was in my very first year of the podcast.
Wow.
And I just shared with you offline that I listened to it again this morning, and actually, I was pretty pleased with how it had turned out. You were amazing, but I didn't sound so bad after all, which I felt quite nervous about re-listening to because I don't like to listen to myself. But anyway, we lost touch for a while, and then something strange happened. A more recent guest, also from New York, as you are in New York, turned out to be a friend of yours. And by the way, I don't think I shared this with you when I shared this with you, was
Yeah.
that the way David was talking, my other guest, David Homan, there was something that made me say, you're reminding me of someone I interviewed before. Do you know Michael Roderick? So it was me that actually picked up on something. And of course,
Huh.
he said, yes, you were very good friends and he had known you for years. And I think he
Yeah.
said he learned a lot from you, which I thought was, yeah, very cool because he's an interesting guy.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so
It's
cool.
amazing.
And um so David, who we discovered was a friend of yours, also introduced me to two people in my city in Vancouver that I also didn't know. And your name came up with them as well. And so one of them, B, who I mentioned to you, you said was an amazing guy. He's been on my podcast. And Mike Desjardins, you weren't sure about, but um, I- something made me then say, I have to reach out to you again. And I'm so glad that I did. And,
Yeah.
so did you even know any of that was happening?
Um, Most of the time I don't. Like every
No.
once in a while I'll hear that a friend of mine's been on somebody's podcast or that I was mentioned or those types of things. But most of the time I don't. Like most of the time I'm just kind of going about my day and I get a message from somebody like, oh, so and so mentioned you on, this show, and I figure we should, reconnect or talk more. And it's always really fun to hear.
But that's the point. That's the point of you. The header on your LinkedIn banner says, "Get people talking about you when you're not in the room," and I think
Yes.
that's one of your uh, gifts to be able to teach that as well as make it happen. So, what does that actually look like in practice, and why do
Yeah.
so many smart, talented people fail to make that happen?
Yeah, well, I think it ultimately comes down to there are three main principles to consider when you're thinking about referability. It's easy to remember them because it spells the word aim. And the first is accessibility, right? So we always kind of have to start from the place of, do people feel like they get whatever it is that you're talking about, or do they feel like they're on the outside? Do they feel like they don't understand? Does it feel too complicated or sort of too complex for them? But even once somebody feels like, okay, this is accessible, I really like it, there has to be an element of influence next, where basically you are motivated to share that concept, that idea, that person with somebody else. And a common misconception we have about influence is that it's about persuasion, it's about me getting you to do something. But real influence is when you do something without me asking you to do it, and the reason why you're going to do that is it makes you look better. So,
Mhm.
very often we have to think about, okay, if I did share something or if I did talk about something, how is it going to make somebody else's life better? How is it going to make them look when they share it, when they share it with others? But even if you have those first two, the last one, memory, is so, so important, because if you don't develop memory triggers, if you don't make it easy for somebody to remember what they just heard, then there's a very good chance that they're actually going to forget about it and possibly share somebody else's content or somebody else's ideas, even though yours may be stronger. They're not packaged specifically for memory. So usually that's the hurdle that I see, is that a lot of the time experts especially, they're so kind of in their own expertise, they're so sort of overwhelmed by it that they don't think about that packaging piece of it. They don't think about, how am I going to make sure that this thing that I'm sharing or talking about is easy to transfer, is easy to talk about when I'm no longer there to explain it.
Wow. Okay. So I think I was thinking something different, because when I
Mhm.
think of um somebody being memorable, or I'm thinking about the person more
Yeah,
than the framework or the thing that they're talking about, their product, so to speak, because it's whether
yeah,
the person has made the impression on me. But you're saying it encompasses all those three things.
yeah. And I would say that you can apply it to the product and you can also apply it to the person, right? So we
Okay.
could actually take this exact same concept and we can layer it onto the person. So the first hurdle, accessibility. Does
Mm-hmm.
this person make you feel comfortable
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking to them? Do
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you would want to introduce them to somebody else because you've had a comfortable experience with that
Right.
individual, right? Like you
Right.
enjoyed having that conversation and you feel good about passing them on to somebody else. You feel good about making that
Sure.
introduction. And in essence, whether or not you realize it, a lot of the time it makes you look good
Sure.
when you share with somebody else, somebody that basically you approve of, that you think is solid, that is going to make their life better and sort of
Mm-hmm.
help them out. But the thing is, we meet tons of people, right? Tons and tons of people. So the memory piece is a really important component. Whether or not we decide that we're going to share somebody with our audience, it's like, well, what do we remember about them? What is the thing that really kind of stood out to us? And memory does, it lives in the world of specificity. So if I give you something very specific, or if I tell you a specific story, you are far more likely to remember me than if I tell you a generic story, or if
Sure.
I share with you something that's very sort of broad and open. So the same thing can apply whether you're talking about a product or a person. And I'm
Fair
sure
enough.
you've probably encountered that, right? Where you've had guests where you're like, it kind of was interchangeable, where it's like, I feel like both of these people spoke about these things, but there might have been another guest where you're like, I very distinctly remember them using these words or talking about this thing, or just their personality kind of triggered something where I just like, I think of them and I can kind of picture them in my mind's eye. and I'm just more likely to make an intro or talk about them
Mhm.
or sort of share what they've shared.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That did make me think of a guest I had on the show who was all about neuroscience to do with the brain affecting relationships or connections with people.
Mm,
And I was
yep,
thinking at first, like she was pitched to me by an agency, and I always give people an opportunity by having an introduction call with them because I never know if I'm going to miss something exciting or what.
sure.
But um, and I was a little bit hesitant about the neuroscience behind it and the brain. And I'm thinking, can I keep up with this conversation? So when I met her, loved her. And secondly, when she came on the show, she had written a book. I think she'd written a book. Yeah, she'd written a book about this. And she uses these examples of people. Bob is the brains of the operation and he keeps things go and so on. And it made it so much more interesting and accessible in that sense.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about in that respect. It made me also think, though, that when people come to you with this, or whether they're coming to you for that specific thing or not, and this comes
Mhm.
out, do you find that it's a certain is it the more cerebral people, or is it the introverted people, or is it like, do they actually know that they're not um, um, r- relating to people when they're talking to them? Because I always say, read your audience. You have to know if they're with you
Yeah.
or not. And some people don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a spectrum, right? Like in terms of self-awareness, right? So there are folks who they have kind of gotten to a place in their life where they're almost always kind of on autopilot and they're not really paying very much attention to how other people are experiencing or sort of interacting. And then you got the folks who are kind of in the middle where, maybe they're pretty good at communicating, but they're missing certain things. And then you got the people who they're just so self-aware that you can almost see them like immediately correcting something or noticing something that most folks aren't necessarily noticing and aren't necessarily picking up on, right? So there's that spectrum of ability when it comes to self-awareness. But in addition to that, there's also the component of when we spend so much time with our content or our material or whatever it is that we've spent the time to study, we start to build these shortcuts a lot of the time in our brains where we're like, oh, yeah, well, everybody gets that. Like everybody understands that. And we just kind of rattle on, right? And we like talk about it
Yeah.
in our language and in sort of our way of doing it. But there are lots of instances where, oh, that thing actually has to be explained, right? Like that thing actually has to be explained. Or this thing that you see as so valuable in this particular context or this particular language is actually not being seen as that valuable by the person on the other side of the table. And I think that's the core of a lot of the work. And the thing I often like to say about communication is that communication is the very first thing we learn, but it's the one thing we never truly master.
Mm.
So we come out, we're born, and instantly communication is about I need food, I need help, all these things.
Yeah.
But as time progresses, communicating our needs and letting people know what we're doing, letting them know where the value is, that is a constant journey and it's a back and forth. It's understanding, well, what does this other person actually want? And what is it that they're actually looking for here? And how am I in the service that I have or the work that I do supporting them? Or am I not a fit for what it is that they're actually looking for and that they're trying to accomplish?
But you also mentioned uh, self-awareness. in that
Yeah.
piece. And is that something then that people can learn to become more self-aware? I would think so, talking and answering my own question. But it's I don't know, some of it seems to me to be more innate, like paying attention to the audience, like I said, and having to shift your, way of doing things. So do these things, do they take a long time? Do people ever see it? I don't know, like, to make those
Yeah.
changes.
I mean, I think that we're all capable of learning,
Sure.
right? Sort of at the at the heart. But there are some of us who have a affinity to a certain type of learning, and we're able to kind of move quicker through some things than others, right? So there's some people who math is very, very intuitive to them, right? Like they can just kind of do math and really feel pretty comfortable with it. But on the same note, they may be really stuck when it comes to literature, right?
Mhm,
And doing things that are more dramatic,
mhm,
and the flip side can also be true. So I think when it comes to this aspect of self-awareness, the first sort of hurdle is always like, how do I understand the idea of paying attention to somebody else, right? Like that's the
mhm,
first hurdle, right?
mhm,
But then if there are techniques and methodologies and things that we can learn, there are always going to be people who are going to lean more into those techniques and be better at those techniques from the learning standpoint, and it takes them less time, right, to get to that level of facility. But it doesn't mean that somebody who feels, well, I just am, I'm not good at
mhm,
this, right,
mhm,
I'm not
mhm,
good at relating to people,
mhm.
it doesn't mean that that person can't. It just means that there is a learning curve, and that there's hard work in some cases to be done, right, in order to get more uh, accomplished in that particular area.
Yeah. So I think about, like, do people come to you and they say, well, I want to be referable. I don't just, I know all this stuff, but
Yep.
I want people to remember me so that they will refer me. And can you see right away whether they're where they are on the arc?
Yeah, most of the time I can. And the way that it comes down to is, how are they referring to their work, right?
Yes.
So there's a core difference between the person who basically spends most of the time saying, I solved this problem, I
Yes.
do this, accomplish all these types of things, and the person who basically says, my clients go through this, right?
Yes.
And the way that I support them is in this model, or in this
Yeah.
process. And the thing that I often find is that most of the attention is put on the solution for experts, where it's like, I solved this problem for
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
and not enough attention is put on the problem that they're actually experiencing, and
So
making
true.
sure that they've got some good language
Yeah.
around that problem, so that the person on the other side of the table can say, you know what, that's me.
Hmm.
That's exactly what I'm dealing with. That's exactly what I'm going through. And now I trust you, or I feel more trust for you to
Hmm.
be able to share your solution. I find that there's a lot of language and things that are very, very solution heavy before we actually get into the weeds of, well, what is the actual problem here? And is it a real problem, or is it something that is masking another problem? Because a lot of the time there are deeper problems that we don't necessarily realize
True.
until we start to sort of dig deeper.
Yeah, that's so true. And that actually goes back to the old days of going into a networking event. We don't do that. Maybe more people are going back to doing it today, but I think the same problem still applies. People don't know how to network properly, and it's all about what you just talked about. It's brilliant. All right,
Thank
so
you.
let's get into your triple threat framework. This is
Sure.
something you shared with me the other day, and I thought it was fascinating. So,
Yeah.
in the theater world, actor, singer, dancer is a ranking, not just a list. How does,
Yes.
and there aren't many people, although I know you, like me, love to talk about showbiz. So before we get
Yeah.
into your framework, let's do that. Who would you say were, let's think of three people who are the best examples of the triple threat. Who would you
Sure.
think of?
Um, so Hugh Jackman is a classic example, right?
Yes.
And he is
Yes.
classic actor, singer, dancer. We
Correct.
don't
Perfect.
know Hugh Jackman for his dancing. We know Hugh Jackman for his acting, and we got to know him for his singing, but his mass appeal, the traction that Hugh Jackman got came from being a really good actor and being a recognizable actor.
Right.
We know him as Wolverine,
Yeah.
for most
Yeah.
of the sort of mass population. So that's an example that you would see sort of within that, within that kind of world.
Mm. Do we have another one?
Let's see. We can go with okay, Ariana Grande,
Oh, really? You
right?
would put her in
Yeah.
that category? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she started in musical theater,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
musical theater was her, was her growth, but all of her traction came from singing.
Yes. And she did
She
it.
is
She had an amazing career as a singer. Correct. Grammy
exactly.
winning. Exactly. Okay.
Yep. So
And
she's a
then went
classic
back.
singer,
Yeah.
actor, dancer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like she can do musical theater, but she's got a heck of a voice,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
she's got acting chops, right? Like she's got good performance, ability,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
all of her traction, when we look at how did her career grow, it came from that world of being that pop star
Hmm.
and doing those Disney Channel
Hmm.
acting bits, right?
Right.
Like that's where she got most of the traction and most of the opportunity. And if we go to, let's just take her career,
Hmm.
right? If suddenly if when she was first offered a recording deal,
Hmm.
she was like, no, I'm going to focus on my TV acting
Hmm.
and, do some theater and things like that. It could be argued that her career would not have become as big,
Hmm.
as it did.
Hmm.
Because she really took off as a singer.
Yes.
Most of the world knows her as a singer and knows her songs.
Hmm. But was that just getting a good agent at the time? I mean, someone who influenced
It
her to go that route?
It could be,
Okay.
but it also, it also could be that she impressed people with that ability,
Yes. Yeah.
and those people saw what
Saw.
she was doing
Yeah.
and basically said, "We've got to take her that much further,
Yeah.
right? Because we can
Yeah.
see the talent, we can see the energy here." But Lady Gaga is the same way,
Yeah. She's a good example.
right?
Yeah.
She's another great example. And she's an example of the way that I like to think about it, is that there are lots of people who their careers are like lanes on the highway. And there are certain people who basically they stay behind the same car for all of their life, even though there are other lanes.
Hmm.
So Lady Gaga is kind of a perfect example where she was in the theater, she was a performer, she lived in that kind of world, but she became a really major pop star. And because she became a major pop star, here's the line of all the, here's the lane of all the performers. The pop star lane opened up and she was able to pass
Hmm.
all those different performers and then actually switch into the acting lane later on in her career
Right.
and get anything she wanted because of the traction
Yeah. That
that
she,
she had built,
yeah.
right?
I have to, you have to throw in for her though, the writing as well, right? Not
Yes.
just, right. Cause she's a songwriter as well. Oh,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
She has talent there.
yeah. So how does this idea translate into thinking talents and what are the three types that you have identified? Let's talk about that.
Sure. So the way this translates into the thinking talents is that there is also a triple threat. And just like there are performing talents of acting, singing, dancing, there are thinking talents, which I call the scientist, the celebrity, and the magician.
Okay.
So if scientist is your top thinking talent, then
Hmm.
you are a highly analytical thinker. You're very good at breaking things down and understanding things on a granular level. You're not really bored by research. You're happy to kind of dig in and spend a lot of time understanding things, but you may not be as excited about being out in front of people. You may really just enjoy the element of sort of spending most of your time in the lab and thinking of things from this sort of more structured kind of granular way.
Okay.
Whereas if celebrity is your top talent, then you are way more relational driven. You love like people and connecting with people, and you're probably more comfortable being out front in some capacity to varying degrees. There are some people
Right.
who love the full-on performance element of celebrity, and then there are people who I've often referred to as quiet celebrities, where they're just really, really great at getting people to feel connected to them, getting people to feel like they themselves are a celebrity, right? Like that's
Nice.
part of that thinking talent and sort of that, that process. And then finally, if magician is your top talent, you are 100% wired for novelty. So you're an incredibly innovative thinker. You're good at sort of breaking things down and looking at them from different angles and being able to say, okay, everybody's doing this way, and here's a new way to do it. But for many, many folks who count magician as that top thinking talent, repetition will kill you. So, even though it can make you more successful to do the same thing over and over again, as the magician, you're constantly trying to find something new or something innovative in your own experience and in your own life. So when we start to think about this as an actual triple threat, and we
Mhm.
say, okay, if I were to put these thinking talents in a certain order, especially if we're a subject matter expert, right? Especially if we're somebody who gets paid for our brains, then just like the performers that I was just talking about, we can actually gain far more traction and find these different lanes that I'm talking about and possibly switch lanes for the things that we're trying to accomplish and that we're trying to do by actually leaning into these talents or finding partnerships and opportunities that leverage the other talents as opposed to pushing against the talents that we naturally have because somebody else from a marketing standpoint told us we had to do things in a certain way. And the one I often use is the example of the scientist who is almost always kind of sold the idea that business success comes from being the celebrity. And what I often like to say about this is that it's much easier to be the Dr. Phil to somebody's Oprah than to be Dr. Phil trying to be Oprah.
Right. Right. Okay. So if I were to, after listening to you, if I were to see where you, and by the way, we're all a combination, right?
Yes.
Usually, but
Yep.
but there's an order that matters that is your primary versus your secondary and so on.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to guess that you are most definitely the magician first.
Hmm.
Am I right?
Yep. You're
Okay,
correct.
because what you've done is you've now created a new framework or a new structure from which to um, uh, get teach people and share with people and encourage people to bring themselves the best of themselves out. I
Yep.
think probably I don't know about the other two, which order, because I think you probably like to do research, but I'm going to say that. I'm going to say celebrity is the third one.
Interesting. So
Wrong?
I'm actually magician celebrity scientist.
Okay. Okay.
I am not a big fan of research,
Okay.
actually. And what's interesting about that, and this is what's so fascinating about the triple threat, and when people sort of identify as a triple threat, it's I, you know, use a sort of scientist quality to be able to put together a framework, right?
Mhm,
It is a
mhm.
very scientific way of thinking, of saying like,
Yeah.
here's one, two, and three.
Yeah.
To the point where I've had people basically in very similar in these interviews say, oh, I would have placed you as scientists first. The way that you break things down and the way that you understand things, and
I
and
can
all
see
of those
that.
elements.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the important pieces of this as well is also the context and the situation that you're in. And it may be that you're actually leaning into one of your lower talents at certain times in order to communicate something, or because the situation demands it, right? So in some cases, if I'm presenting or if I'm doing an interview, celebrity may be much higher for
Yeah.
me during that interaction
Because
than
you can rise to
magician.
the occasion, because you can. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. Some people don't have
exactly.
that self-awareness, don't have that ability on the spot to do that, but I can identify that. Okay.
Yeah,
So, and I also sort of figured out mine, I think, when we were talking before. I
I love
think
it.
for me, celebrity, scientist, magician. I think
I
because
love it.
yeah, I don't think I'm as comfortable being innovative. So that's what,
Yeah,
yeah. And I also need to know how does that work? What do you, I needed to know what,
yeah,
right? Okay. So how does
yeah,
knowing your triple threat change the way you approach building relationships and getting referrals? And can you
yeah.
give me a true life example of what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah, so let's take your example of a celebrity scientist magician.
Hmm.
As a celebrity, you are far more likely to be relational and connect with interesting people. But because scientist is second, you actually like to go deep and you like to understand things on more of that granular level. So there are going to be people that you're going to basically connect with better because of that desire, that
Hmm.
scientist's desire to sort of pick things apart, right? So, as a podcast host, you are probably going to gravitate towards magicians as potential guests.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
and it's not that it's always going to happen,
Right.
but you're going to have moments where you're basically like, that person's doing something that I can't quite explain, and I want to be able to explain it. I
Mm,
want to be able to break it down. I want to be able to sort of help people understand,
mhm,
that. Now, when it comes to the referability aspect of things, a lot of the time, what's going to be most helpful for you in terms of referability and opportunities is that you are the host of something. Being
mhm,
the host of a podcast is one thing, but if you are the person who gets people together, chances are you're going to be the person who's going to get more referrals and you're going to generate
mhm,
more of your business that way.
mhm,
And the reason for that is that the relational element is what is motivating people and sending them out to talk about you. And because scientist is second, your showing of your expertise and the granularity of what it is that you have to offer is what they're going to remember when they go to refer you. So let's just take, for example, working with something like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a very, very broad market, right? And like we have a lot of people who are like, I want to be big on LinkedIn. I want to do different things on LinkedIn. But there are specific components of LinkedIn that you yourself have basically said, I'm going to study these that much deeper and I'm going to understand it. So you're going to take something that maybe somebody was talking about and you're going to be like, here's 3 other layers to that of how this applies to building a relationship, let's just say, on the platform. Well, the person who is part of the gathering that you've put together where you're sharing that expertise, when they go to refer you, they're going to say, so I know that there are all these LinkedIn experts out there, but I was just talking to Janice and she had this whole different way of looking at the direct message model that most people are approaching that I think you would really resonate with, or that I think would be really interesting for you. And that's where a lot of your opportunities and possibilities are going to come from versus the magician. If I'm a magician, all I really ever need to do is show you a magic trick and basically be like, here's this really cool concept or here's this really cool idea. And you're just going to go off and talk about it to other people. You're going to refer me because you're like, nobody, like, you're going to use my framework or use my model with somebody and they're going to say, where did you learn that? And you're going to refer me that way. So magicians, the best thing that they can do is show, not tell. Like they just have to be out there doing things on the spot. Even right now, what did I do? I didn't say, here's an example. I literally took you as the example and what you gave. And in real time, I am showing you the magic trick. I am breaking down where the value is in your thinking talents in real time. That's going to be way more valuable for me in terms of people being interested in listening to this. And it's going to get me far more traction because I'm a magician.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There's something I just I had brought up. I think, okay, wait. Oh, I know what it was.
Yeah.
I saw somewhere you have this black box mastermind community, and you focus on helping you find your triple threat, develop your big ideas, and collaborate with generous, out of the box, awesome thinkers, goats.
Yes.
And it's invitation only. But that's what I found that to be interesting because yes, I'm curious enough about how you operate in this framework with people.
Yeah.
So if you want, you can talk about that for a minute because
sure.
Yeah, that's leading people to you.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. The way that I like to think about it is in the theater world, the black box is a space where you can kind of do anything that you want. If you want to have a theater in the round, you can build a theater in the round. If you want to have a proscenium stage, you can build a proscenium stage. So the idea of the black box is if you get a bunch of people who are expanding their thought leadership, and each of them has a different triple threat order and different strengths within that, there's a lot of amazing collaboration opportunities. And there's also a lot of opportunities to be able to see things that you're not seeing. So just like in the theater world where we would do scene study and I would watch somebody act out something, in the black box, somebody might explain something or do some of their work while the rest of the group watches. And then we'll talk about what's landing, what's not. How do we make this idea or this concept or this thing that you're doing more accessible? And then very similar to the theater world where you do a showcase, you basically give people the opportunity to present those ideas and those concepts and what they're working on, and you invite an audience. so that you can actually see, okay, well, what kind of traction is this idea getting? And you do it in that safe space, because black boxes are spaces in the theater world where you get to experiment. You get to experiment without worrying about, okay, this is a massive audience right away. You
Mhm.
get to sort of play around with that. And that's the thing I just see all the time, is that so many experts really struggle with playing with their ideas and putting their ideas out there, often because there isn't a lot of safe space around that.
Right.
So it's really about, okay, well, if you got together with a bunch of really awesome, generous thinkers, right?
Mhm.
And they helped you with your ideas, like what could be possible. So that's really kind of where that concept came from, where it's like, let's look at these talents that people
Yeah.
have and really kind of help them figure out, how do you order them and what do you do with them and how do you support each other.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're living through a moment where AI is changing everything, and the
Mhm.
political landscape feels uncertain and exhausting. It's
Yep.
emphasis on exhausting. You would think, even last night, I said to my husband, because we're not even American, but we've always got the American stuff on to know what's going on. And I have family down there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is exhausting. I don't want to watch it anymore. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how, yeah. So you'd think that might make people pull back from connection, but you
Yeah.
seem to believe the opposite. Why is this actually the greatest moment for genuine connections? And I believe it
Because,
is too. I believe it is.
yeah, because ultimately, when we're in very divided experiences, whether it be you're on the side of technology or you're not on the side of technology, you're following this ideology or you're not following it, like when you're in all these divided scenarios, people will naturally feel alone.
Mm.
It's just one of those things where it's like, whatever side or even just being in the middle, you feel alone, right? You
Yeah.
don't feel connected. And when you talk to somebody else, you realize that you're not alone. And you realize that somebody else is also feeling what you're feeling and what you're going through. And I think that, there are so many people right now. I'll use AI as sort of the example. There's so many people right now talking to their bots, that talking to a human is going to feel so different and so refreshing, because they're spending 90% of their day talking to whatever, Terminator
Yeah.
you want,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So true. Um, I just realized what time it is because I could talk to you forever. And I probably um I've got to start thinking about making these shorter and doing two of them at the same time. You know what I mean? Because I haven't done
Yeah.
that yet. So lots of nuggets here, lots of things to think about. You actually, I thank you for doing that analysis on me, because I do say to people that, my take on LinkedIn is this, which I hope, I don't say that, but I hope is different from someone else's, because you always want to be unique. You want to
Yeah.
stand out from the crowd, but it comes from an honest place. And that's what I like people
Yeah.
to know up front, because if you're not a relationship person, then it's not going to work. If you're like,
Yeah.
how many messages can I get out in a month and how many responses can I expect? I'm not about the numbers. I'm about the connections. So that to
Yeah.
me just fit with what you said so much. But whether I'm getting it out to the right people in the right way and whatever, that's another whole story. So I think that's where people um, get benefit from working with people like you, right?
Yeah.
Um, so thank you for being here, Michael, or
Of course.
Michael. I'm looking at, that's so funny. I moved you over and I'm not seeing
Uh-huh.
the name Michael. And then I just had a flash of that wasn't your name. Oh my God. Okay. So what I loved about the conversation that it reminds us though that referability isn't an accident. It's something you can build you intentionally by understanding how you think, how you connect, and what you want people to say about you when you walk out of the room. It's just it's so amazing that in a world that's moving faster than ever, the people who slow down long enough to invest in real relationships and real conversations are the ones who will always have a seat at the table. Um, Now, if people want to learn more about you, Michael, and
Sure.
your company, Small Pond Enterprises, where will they find you?
Yeah, they can just go to smallpondenterprises.com, and all the info is there. I've written a daily email since probably 2017. So you can sign up to be on the daily email and you'll get all sorts of different insights and ideas and thoughts from that. And yeah, just feel free to poke around and say hello.
Are you ever putting those daily emails into a book?
I have thought about it. I've had a number
Yeah.
of folks talk to me about it. It may that may be something that comes up in the future.
Because that's a lot. I mean,
That is,
every day since 2017, absolutely. And they're interesting.
yeah,
They one topic, one thing per day, right? Do you write
yes,
them every day or do you write them in batches? I have to know because,
sure.
yeah, is it
Yeah, most of the time I write every day.
okay?
Every once in a while, if there's travel or if there's something where I
Yeah,
know I'm going to be away, I'll do a batch. Like I'll write
okay,
like a
fair
whole
enough.
week's worth, things like
Yeah.
that. But I
But do
like
your
to write every
topics
day.
come to you usually daily? Like, what am I going to write about today? Or,
Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time, I'm just kind of walking around and I'll have a thought and I'll just sort of jot something down. Or at the end of the day, I'll be doing the dishes and a couple of things will sort of like, pop up.
yeah,
And then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to write about that today.
love it. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing
Absolutely.
everything.
Of
And
course.
to my audience, if this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone in your world who most deserves to to be discovered. Until next time, remember, it really is all about relationships. If today's show inspired you to make a new connection, why not start with me? Head over to LinkedIn and connect with me. Be sure to let me know you are a podcast listener because I select one listener each month who connects with me on LinkedIn for a complimentary profile audit. Don't forget to stay connected and be remembered.